December 14th, just 10 days till Christmas Eve. On December 14th, Joachim woke up before Mama and Papa. He sat up in bed only 10 days till Christmas Eve. What was going to happen to Elizabeth, the angel Ephriel, and all the others who were going to Bethlehem? Before he got a chance to open the calendar, Mama and Papa were in his room. Under his arm, Papa had 2 large atlases. Joachim opened the door for number 14. The folded paper fell on the bed, and in the calendar they saw a picture with a raft with people, animals, and angels in it. "The raft," said Mama, and they sat on the edge of the bed, and that day Joachim got to read Isaiah. Toward the end of the 9th century, a strange raft was sailing in the Po River towards the direction of the Adriatic Sea to the east. The country they were sailing through was called Lombardy. On the raft were a small flock of sheep bleating crossly because they were not allowed to drink the river water. The smallest sheep was running back and forth, and the little bell was ringing from its woolly neck. 2 wise men were making wise observations about the beautiful countryside they were sailing through. One of them was black, the other was white. After a long discussion about the blessings of oranges and dates, they agreed that God could not have created a better world, at least not in just 6 days. At the back of the raft stood a man in Roman clothes, steering with a long pole. Such clothes had only been out of fashion for a short amount of time. He was talking to a small girl who was holding a piece of cardboard in her hands. On one side was written "to Bethlehem." On the other was a picture of a young woman with long fair hair. Most conspicuous were the 2 angels at the front of the raft, beating their wings to keep the raft from drifting towards the river bank. This was long before boats were equipped with propellers. Now and again the cherub Imperial turned to the others and praised the beauty of the landscape. "Wonderful," he called out. "Nothing but glory and joy. It's just as on the 5th day when God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was good." Once or twice somebody on the shore noticed them, but the raft was seen only for a brief second. That's because it wasn't just sailing down the Po, it was sailing through history as well. It was crossing the tidal wave of time, and when a little child stood on the bank of the river and pointed at the strange raft so that his Mama and Papa would see it too, it then disappeared long before the child's forefinger even had time to unfold. So perhaps it was only a mirage. They passed old Roman bridges and buildings, theaters and temples, aqueducts. Ephriel pointed at all the churches. "I was often in this area as a young man," Quirinius told them. "But that was a very long time ago, or the opposite, of course. It's still a good while before we get there." "Dixie!" Elizabeth realized that he was talking about Roman times, when there were Roman soldiers nearly everywhere in the world. What did it look like then? The Roman theaters were still standing, the orange trees as well, and the red poppies along the river bank, but nobody had heard about Jesus. What's new are all the churches and monasteries, priests and monks. "Dixie! Dixie!" Before long, Joshua pointed to the river bank. "We'll land over there." Quirinius steered the raft towards the land, helped by the 2 angels, who beat their wings energetically, while Joshua the shepherd latched onto the tree with his crook and drew the raft to the shore. The angels said a few warning words to the cherub. "If we meet any people, you must be sure to remember to say 'fear not' in a gentle, angelic voice, so as not to cause them fear. We're only visiting, so it's important that we behave properly." The pilgrims alighted from the raft. They passed a country church and turned uphill through the countryside. The towns were not very large at this time, but soon they were approaching one of the largest. Ephriel told them it was Padua. Just before they sped through the town gate, they saw a man in a blue tunic. He was sitting on a stone, his head in his hands. It looked as if he'd been sitting there for a very long time. Imperial flew up. "Fear not, and be in no wise afraid. I, Imperial, am one of God's angels who is out on a godly errand." It looked as if the cherub's words had no effect, or it had an effect, for the man did not throw himself to the ground and hide his head. He was neither Alleluia nor a Gloria Dei. He simply got to his feet and walked. "Then he is one of us," said Ephriel. The man offered his hand to Elizabeth. I am Isaac, the shepherd, and I am going the same way as you." That made it much easier to guide the sheep through Padua. They were followed by 3 shepherds, 2 kings of the Orient, 2 angels, 1 governor, and a little girl from Norway. Altogether, there were 15 of them. They were going so fast that the few people who were out in the streets didn't have time to look at them before they vanished. The pilgrims only just managed to see the inhabitants of the town, too. When they glimpsed an early riser, the man or woman disappeared in the next instant, and was perhaps replaced by a different man or woman. Elizabeth thought they were in town for only half a minute, but in fact the strange pilgrimage haunted the streets of Padua for 7 or 8 long years. For that half minute consisted of 30 brief seconds, and those 30 brief seconds were divided amongst the 7 or 8 years. Ancient accounts tell us that there was never so much talk of angels in Padua as during the magic years between 1804 and 811. Now and then someone or other thought they had seen something strange in the streets. Could it have been a procession of angels who had swept through the town? Outside the town walls they stopped in front of a small monastery. Strange to see a Roman town again. I wonder who the emperor is. It's exactly 800 years after Christ. On Christmas Day this year, Charles the Great, or Charlemagne, will be crowned Emperor of the West. Then we'll soon be starting a new century, said Joshua the shepherd, and he struck the shepherd's crook against the monastery wall and said, "To Bethlehem, to Bethlehem." Papa opened the atlas and pointed at the Po River and found the town of Padua. Then he turned the pages backwards and forward and with his finger tried to trace the long distance the pilgrims had run. "Here's Halden." Then they came to the lake in Sweden. That must be Vern. And from there they hurried south through Sweden to Kungälv, Gothenburg, Halmstad, and Lund. They rode across the Shetland and visited Copenhagen. Yes, I can find it all. They arrived in Finn and leaped through Odense. From Middelfart they were ferried through the little Scheldt to Jutland. There they passed the towns of Kulding and Flensburg. They traveled back in history as well, said Mamma. But Papa went on following the path. Here's Hamburg. Then Elizabeth was left lying in the market in Hanover. Yes, it's here. And here's Hamelin, the town that had broken the solemn promise. You broke a solemn promise, too. You opened my secret box, said Joachim. Papa continued. Further south is Paderborn. This is where the cherub imperial flew down in spirals from the church tower. From there they ran to Cologne and continued up the Rhine River, and Imperial was quite right. It's wonderfully beautiful there. That was during the 13th century. Wait a minute. I want to follow the whole route. In Mainz, then they met Balthasar, then in Worms and Basel. Today Basel is in Switzerland, but Elizabeth was there around 1100, said Mamma. Here's Lake Biel and the Lake of Geneva. I found the little place called Martigny. This is a good map. Through the St. Bernard Pass. Yes, today there are tunnels all over the place. Down through Val d'Aoste to Lombardy and the Po Valley. Bravo! But they're traveling through history as well. I think that journey is an even stranger one to think about. Only now did Papa look up from the map. But the flower seller made that up. Well, I think it's true, said Joachim. Yes, who knows, said Mamma. Papa only shook his head. Now I wonder which route they're going to take. It's 8 o'clock, exclaimed Mamma. There was some quarreling and scolding because they were so short on time. That's what Joachim called stress, and nothing was worse. As he ran to school, many strange names were buzzing in his head. He had now seen all the places on the map. At school, they had started to rehearse the nativity play. Joachim's class would be putting it on in the gym on the last school day before Christmas, and Joachim was going to be the second shepherd. And tomorrow we will read December 15th. Good night.